It's time for MacBreak Weekly. The whole team is here. I'm back from vacation. Andy Anako's here. Rene Ritchie and Alex Lindsay will talk about Apple's quarterly results. They came out right after the show last week, but we've had time to chew on them and analyze them and tell you what it all means. Jony Ive does a rare interview all about the Apple Watch, and Andy explains why there'll never be a better Mac. It's all coming up next on MacBreak Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for MacBreak Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 609, recorded Wednesday, May 9th, 2018. The Furnurvural lens. MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by 23andMe. Now through Mother's Day, get 20% off each 23andMe DNA kit, plus free gift wrap. Go to 23andme.com/twit today. And by Rocket Mortgage from Quicken Loans. Home plays a big role in your life. That's why Quicken Loans created Rocket Mortgage. It lets you apply simply and understand the entire mortgage process fully, so you can be confident you're getting the right mortgage for you. Get started at rocketmortgage.com/MacBreak. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Apple. Hello, I'm back. And we have the full crew assembled. Rene Ritchie is here. Thank you for filling in for me. Was it last week that you did the show?
Andy was last week. I was the week before. They needed a week of recovery with Andy before you did.
Andy Anako also here. It's great to have you back. Or I guess I'm back.
Sorry about the smell in the break room. My second guest had ferrets.
And
call it an emotional support ferret.
In studio with us, although you can never really tell because his cameras are always so good, it's Alex Lindsay from the Pixel Corps. And we are gathered together today to celebrate Apple revenue of $61.1 billion.
Yeah, it turns out that the iPhone X was a horrible failure.
What? You know, Rene, you can take a victory lap if you want, because you've been, every time these iPhone 10 it's not selling rumors came out, you said, well.
I mean, it's not just me. Tim Cook has said it. I mean, almost every reputable financial analyst, from Ben Beharan to Horace Dedya, anyone who Kirk Burgess, everyone who actually follows Apple says it's not true, and you can't extrapolate one bit of supply chain data into a pattern because Apple pre-buys so much. Like they'll buy all the NAND flash, or they'll buy all the OLED displays, and then later they don't need any because they stockpiled all of them, or they control their mix so carefully. So it's just it's lunacy. And I did a video about it because I got super tired of having to do it every quarter, and I used that old Jim Cramer video where he says, if you're short on Apple and the earnings is coming up, what you do is you start a rumor, and Apple publications love that story, so they'll do it every time, and then you tell your friend and they have, and all of a sudden the stock goes down and you make your quarter.
I have to say, I think that's happening an awful lot these days. Here's Tim Cook's quote from the analyst call. Customers chose iPhone 10 more than any other phone each week in the March quarter, just as they did following its launch in the December quarter. More than any other iPhone. So it's the best-selling iPhone, and of course, iPhone's the best-selling.
No, it's the best-selling phone.
In some regions, it's both. In some regions, it's both, the best-selling iPhone globally, and in some places, it's the best-selling phone, and in some major territories, it's number 1, 2, and 3 selling.
What it's not is performing poorly.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it's on the flip side of that, it could be just sad to think that the other iPhones are selling even more poorly than the iPhone 10, which is selling horribly. I mean, I got to hand it to
say
Tim.
That.
He's probably putting a brave face on for himself as well as for the shareholders.
It was the best March quarter ever. Revenue growth is strong, but of course it's strong because the iPhone 10 costs a king's ransom.
$1,000.
Revenue grew in every geographic segment. Over 20% growth in China, which is huge. I didn't, he says in Japan too. I was in Japan for the last couple of weeks. Didn't see as many iPhones as you'd see here in the States, I have to say. But nevertheless, here in the States, it's easily the best-selling phone, right? There's not even a
what I thought was amazing was that there was I can't find the graph right now. I know I was looking at it somewhere, but it was the top 4. Were the best selling were the X, and then the 8 and the 8 Plus, and then the 7, and the 7 was still above the Samsung S9, which was right behind it. But it was so the fact that the 7 that's a year old is still outselling is kind of amazing as well.
Yeah. Apple also announced that they're going to do another repurchase of its shares. They had committed to $210 billion previously. They're adding $100 billion to that.
And all that repatriation money.
And they still have lots of cash. It's kind of remarkable. That made Warren Buffett happy because he according to his announcement at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting, he'd upped his Apple share considerably in January. He's now got like $4.2 billion in Apple.
And he says he wants all of it.
He wants it all. Yeah. I'll take it all, thank you.
Right.
Because he is the king of buy it and hold on to it investing. There's the old story about how people ask Jeff Bezos, I think, asked him at some sort of conference, like, how come everybody isn't a millionaire by listening to your advice? And Warren Buffett said, because nobody's interested in getting rich slowly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He's gotten very, very rich. Not very slowly, but
fairly slowly.
He makes his money the old-fashioned way.
And when you consider he was as a child he was throwing out newspapers.
Yeah.
It has been very slow. It's just been a slow, very continuous increase.
He said it's not a technology buy. Apple's not a technology buy for him. Because they asked him, well, why didn't you buy Microsoft? He said, well, in the beginning because I was stupid, and now because I'm friends with Bill and I think it would be unseemly. Why didn't you buy Google? He said, Amazon. He said, well, Amazon's a miracle, and I don't buy miracles.
Right.
So he's a value investor. He looks for companies that are going to do well over the long term, and so he doesn't consider it a technology play. In fact, I think he says specifically, I don't buy technology stocks, but I just think the fundamentals of Apple are strong.
There's a new model beyond products and beyond services where Wall Street is looking at Apple as a cash return model.
Well, 16% increase in the dividend payout now, and they're buying back all that stock.
And that's a real easy narrative for them to understand.
Yeah. If you look at, of course, Jason Snell did his beautiful, colorful graphs at sixcolors.com. And, of course, the Q2 is always a slowdown after the new phone comes out, and it's the same here. But if you take out these peaks of the new phone releases, the iPhone is doing very well. It's its best quarter ever, going back all the way to 2012. So a very good quarter for the iPhone. Revenue, of course, up. In fact, the revenue is the third best quarter ever. Pretty good.
And of course, now Apple is doomed because they're like Google is too dependent on search. Apple is now too dependent on iPhone.
Yeah. So let's see. Quarterly Mac revenue also strong, but down over the last couple of quarters, up year over year. Mac sales, though, down. Revenue was up because probably of that iMac Pro being so expensive. But overall sales, not a great quarter for Macintosh. Tim Cook did say, I wasn't in town when he said it. I'm sure you talked about it last week. We're not going to merge iOS and Mac OS. But he didn't say we'll always make Macintoshes. I mean, I think he kind of implied that, but I don't think that him saying they're not going to merge means what some people think it means.
There's a long way to go, I think, and I think primarily Apple's need. There's a whole bunch of parts of their ecosystem, whether it's developing content that goes into the products. So that's your Final Cut and some of the other products there, as well as Xcode and so on and so forth that are going to take time for Apple to
make iOS better. Don't merge Mac OS.
Well, iOS would have to be able to do those things seamlessly and as good as they do them on the Mac before Apple.
Probably can't.
It might be able to, but I think I'm definitely don't believe that the Mac OS will be around forever. But I think that it going anywhere in the next 3 to 5 years would be unlikely.
We should mention that they're putting in blinds, new Lutron automated blinds in Rene's studio, and that's the noise going on behind him.
I apologize. I'll mute in between sections.
Oh no, you don't have to do that. It's not that noisy. Okay. People will probably hear it and wonder, where it's going on.
I was going to say there's something super interesting in that, Apple is really uniquely positioned here because Microsoft wasn't successful with their phone products and they didn't launch their tablet products like Courier. So they maintain this huge legacy operating system in business, which is Windows and PCs. And yeah, they're moving PCs into tablets and things, but the bulk of their business is still PCs. And when you look at Google, they're such a new company that they don't have this legacy computer business. They can go all in on phones and all in on tablets and Chromebooks and all these things. Apple was successful enough, like at least least profitable enough in computers to keep those around, and they're hugely profitable in mobile. So they're balancing both of these things. And I think, if they were terribly unsuccessful in computers, they would have gotten away sooner. Some investors who want them to focus more on the big money makers probably wish they would go away sooner. But Apple's their entire legacy and history is in those products, and I don't think they'll get rid of them until they have something to replace both.
Right.
I don't think they'll ever merge the way that he says they won't. But I think at some point technology will be advanced enough that we just don't need separate devices anymore. And at that point, it doesn't make sense to have a separate iPhone OS and Watch OS and Mac OS.
I'm just bothered that I don't think Apple is as excited about desktop computing as they should be and could be. So I think that at this point, barring future evidence, which I hope is forthcoming, Apple is content to say, okay, it's making some money, it's not losing money, but we don't think there's enough of a future to make this sort of investment, not just in money, but in time and resources and focus to consider what's the next level. How can we elevate desktop computing to the next level? I really believe that heart and soul they are invested in iOS, and any great ideas that they have for the Mac to make it more 21st century gets parried into, but wouldn't that be an even better feature to make the iPad even more productive? So I'm hoping for more evidence to the contrary, but at this point, I would like to see Apple show some excitement about improving any desktop OS.
I'll tell you what they are excited about: service revenue.
Yes.
Look at this graph.
I really want to see them break that out. That's almost meaningless to me.
Well, they don't, because it is Apple Music, it's Apple Pay, it's obviously the App Store. You have
Mostly
to think the
App
App
Store,
Store's
I
got to be a lot of it. Although
exactly.
Cook did say the Apple Pay is kind of their secret weapon, that it's doing well. And Apple Music's clearly doing well. I don't know how much money they make on iCloud. Yeah, without breaking it out, we just don't know. But
the big problem is
this is more money though than iPad and Mac made combined.
I mean, one of the issues here, though, is that, Apple is making the services revenue, and you mentioned Apple Pay, but there's still a lot of countries that don't have Apple Pay that are waiting. In some cases, the banks are being intransigent, and it's hard to get it in there. In some cases, it sounds like they're waiting on Apple, or they're waiting on enough banks, but just Apple Pay hasn't gone everywhere. I don't even think everywhere that Android Pay has gone. And yesterday, I'm sure we'll talk about Google I/O, but Google I/O announced news in 127 countries, and Apple hasn't gotten it past 3 in, 3 years. So there's a really good services business. Apple News is a fantastic service, but most people can't get it.
Yeah, well, Apple has some plans in that regard. We'll talk about those a little bit later, and I can give you my review of Google's new news product, which I think is quite good. It's something Apple probably will want to compete with directly. So anyway, a very good quarter, their best March quarter ever, and a strong revenue growth. Any other tidbits that you noted? It's a week-old news now, but it came, I presume, right after the show was over last week, so we haven't talked
immediately
about
after.
It yet. Yeah, right.
The China story.
As always.
The China story was the other one where everyone was saying Apple was doomed in China and they were falling and losing market share. And again, it was a good quarter for them. And maybe they're losing market share, but they're maintaining unit numbers and they're maintaining profit shares. So it's that was also a little bit of news that I guess was trying to suppress the stock and didn't work out that way.
Luca Mestri said that one of the problems, of course, outside the U.S. is that the dollar's so strong. And so that's challenging because it means their products are more expensive outside the U.S.
Where they drop prices and lose margin, which then affects their numbers. Right. Yeah.
But we found there is a part of a market in most of these countries that is interested in the fact that it's harder to buy. So that a lot of times I've never done it because I just don't have the time to deal with it. But when I'm going to Africa, there's always a thing like, hey, if you can put 10 iPhones in your bag, we'll buy them all. We'll buy them all. At twice what you paid for them, or 50% more than you paid for them. Because they can sell them because there's such a in some of those countries there's such a status symbol of having an Apple product.
Tim said that the iPhone 10 was #1 in China. I think what that means, though, #1 of all the iPhones, right?
Yeah, I would have to. I would. Yeah.
What's interesting about that, though, it's also the most expensive iPhone. So it's an interesting market. It's kind of an unpredictable market. He also spent some time talking about India and how important India was going to be.
Yeah, it's not clear if he meant #1 iPhone because the thing is, in aggregate, Android is far dominant in market share, but there's so many of them. It's hard for any one of them to get individual
carriers and hundreds of manufacturers.
Totally. Yeah. So iPhone 10 could outsell any other individual phone, but all those phones together, Android dramatically outsells iPhone.
Yeah. Mac gained share there as well. The Apple Watch is gaining traction in China, according to Tim Cook. Service is doing extremely well. So yeah, that's something. This is something the financial folks care about more than you and me. But it's nice to see Apple has a. I think they've got a good little business.
They're not going out of business. We don't have to worry.
I think they got a good little business there. They're gonna be around for a while to come. Actually, it's fun. In a way, we also celebrated this week the 20th anniversary of the original iMac, and it's fun. Which was I think on Sunday. It's fun to think about where Apple was 20 years ago compared to right now. 21 years ago, when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, it was just a few $1 million away from bankruptcy. So everything that's happened in the last 21 years has been remarkable.
And then shortly after, it was as if Steve had just started where he left off. It was kind of he left with the Mac and came back and just went, and then we're going to do the Mac again.
Again.
And
he drew that famous quadrant where he said, because they had dozens of products at the time, and he said, and by the way, they were also selling clones when Steve came back, right? He killed that immediately, drew the quadrant, said we're going to have professional, consumer, portable, and desktop, 4 products. That's it. And the iMac announcement was the consumer desktop, right? So here I'll put a little bit of Steve here talking about his iMac.
Come on in.
He's bringing in a camera so he can show it off.
You got to see this thing in person, but I'll do the best I can with video. This is iMac. The whole thing is translucent. You can see into it. It's so cool. We've got stereo speakers.
Some of that laughter is probably coming from Apple employees who watched Steve have a fit the day before, according to Walter Isaacson's biography, because he couldn't get it lit right. And he said, we're going to stay here until it looks right. Yeah. He also had a fit over the button on the front of the iMac, because he had been told, he said, John Rubinstein had told him, you're going to have a slot, and then instead it had a drawer. And in fact, he, according to Isaacson, almost canceled the introduction of the iMac the day before over that small point, and only went ahead when Ruby was able to convince him, well, next one will have a slot. Okay, Steve? Okay? Watch how much he loves the handle, too.
We've got infrared right up here. We've got the CD-ROM drive right in the middle. We've got dual stereo headphone jacks. We got the coolest mouse on the planet right
Okay, wait a minute.
Oh, man, it was so...
The worst mouse ever.
Oh,
ever.
It was the coolest mouse in that it did generate the frostiest reception.
You could say it was cool. You just can't say it was functional, right?
It was a third-party opportunity for other mouse makers.
Yes.
As Apple used to say when they dropped the ball.
There you go.
Come on around. All of the connectors are inside one beautiful little door here, the Ethernet, the USB stuff. Around the back, we've got a really great handle here.
Now, I should point out, this is a 38-pound computer. No one is going to use that handle. But,
well, no, it was just like it was an echo back to the original Mac, so that's part of the design story there's telling. But also, there are times where you actually would like to move a computer from one room to the other, not because it's portable, but because, again, you're in an office and you're sharing, or you're in a school.
But you don't need a handle, Andy, to do that.
Well, yeah, if it's 30 pounds, yeah, you need a handle.
Jony Ive put the handle in. He was actually a little nervous because this is a very expensive case. I think it was $60 per. And I put the handle in, and he said he was very nervous about what Steve would say. But he said, look, we got to put this here because it communicates that it's friendly and it's easy to shift around. Whether it's functional isn't really the point. And Jobs got it and loved it. What he doesn't mention here is a significant missing piece.
The back of this thing looks better than the front of the other guys, by the way. And then around the side.
Steve.
So let's take one more
Steve.
swing around it so you can see. This is what it looks like. And again, you've got to see one of these things in person.
It was very pretty.
$12.99, G3 at 233 megahertz, had 32 megs of RAM, upgradable to 128 megs, not gigs, 32 megs of RAM. What was missing was a floppy drive. As it turned out, that might have been the biggest story of all, about that and the Bondi Blue, because people didn't make computers in colors back in those days. But the fact that Apple would make a PC without a floppy drive, now, that was the courage I think Phil Schiller was referring to.
I was trying to think of when I stopped using floppy drives, but it was
people were still using them at this time. Yeah, but they put those USB ports on there, and
the
really,
USB,
and the CD, and said and they were right in that case. Ironically, this
Well,
Mac has 3 headphone jacks.
Right. I think the last time I seriously used a floppy drive was probably 1995.
Yeah, this is
like
1998.
Right, so
yeah.
3 years. It had already been. It was already kind of dead for.
no, it really wasn't.
Well, for me, no, for me. I'm saying,
sorry,
I was saying,
That's because you were using files that were huge.
Yeah, we were using
You
zip
were on
drives
zip
and
drives, right?
SideQuest drives. Remember SideQuest?
Oh,
drives?
I remember those. Oh, yeah.
Remember the Bernoulli boxes?
Oh yeah.
I was unpacking some of the last boxes, and I found my MO cartridges from
magnetic optical media.
Optical, yeah, which were pretty damn cool, and they're shiny and stuff. But I every time this does come up a lot, this is something that I like to counter. At least to present the other side of the argument that people say, yeah, see, and Apple was ahead of the game, and they've made the computer of the future, and brought it to us early. So, well, again, we forget about what an absolute colossal pain in the butt
at the time
it was to own an iMac at that time, because again. Eventually people got rid of floppies, but it was still, there were no flash drives. There was no Dropbox. It was still very, very important to a lot of people. So that's why a lot of people were buying third-party floppy drives that were designed to look in Bondi Blue by other makers. There were not, USB was practically a brand new standard. So it was really, really hard to find anything that would plug into it without something that would adapt to your old printers and stuff. Just on and on. So make sure that that's part of the history as well. That that's why I really don't like the courage story, because again, it's easy to be courageous when your users have no option but to drop the entire platform and switch to another operating system. It would be courageous if the Mac and the iPhone were just one maker of computers that use that stuff. That I could buy a phone with a headphone jack that runs iOS that is not an iPhone. So that's why I just don't like. I'm not angry about it, but I don't like the word courageous in correction to this. Also, and also let's remember with the iMac, they really had to make a first impression. They had nothing to lose. So as a quote from Steve Jobs that I hope is permanent, that look, if you're gonna, there's nothing that feels worse than failing with something that you didn't believe in to begin with. And this is the iMac, I think, was the inculcation of the idea that if he's going to fail, if this is going to be the last Mac Apple makes, they're going to fail with a Mac that Steve Jobs and everybody who works with it really believes in and really thinks is a great machine.
I had FireWire.
I miss FireWire. The connector story has been really a choppy and ugly story. FireWire was born too soon and died too early, or born too late.
I think that it was. So the rumor,
it replaced SCSI. Let's not forget
the rumor
and parallel ports.
Right. The rumor of both its success for Apple and its demise was that Apple really pushed really hard to get all the camera manufacturers to add the FireWire to their cameras, because now you can just hook it into your PC or Mac or whatever and do it. Then Apple then pushed because they were part of the consortium
with Intel,
so they pushed
and Sony.
So they pushed a royalty payment out,
right?
For the PC manufacturers,
right.
And Apple paid it too. They didn't care, but the PC manufacturers wouldn't pay the royalty. Wouldn't pay the royalty, and Steve Jobs knew they wouldn't pay the royalty, and he knew that they wouldn't put it in their computers. And what it meant was for years the only easy way to get video into your computer was on a Mac. The only way to get video in was a Mac and a camera. So it was like it just owned that market. He didn't care about the money. He just wanted to make sure that they put their feet in the mud. Now, in the end, that's what killed FireWire, because then this big market builds up, and and then Apple decides it's going to change it because they're really the only ones. And as the camera manufacturers,
the same thing happening with Thunderbolt? No,
I don't.
I see Thunderbolt on a lot of
Intel's really
Thunderbolt's on.
Intel's really dropped the ball on it. I mean, they dropped the ball on that and the DisplayPort connector. I think they were supposed to be 3 generations ahead of what they are now. They announced DisplayPort ones at 1.3 and 1.4, and I don't think any of them have shipped yet. And I don't think Thunderbolt is on schedule either, and that's entirely an
Thunderbolt's
Intel thing.
also confusing. I think that's its biggest problem.
Well, they said it was a benefit that it would match USB-C, but now people buy one and not know what it is. They just think it looks the same.
What are the capabilities? It's the same connector. What does it do?
Right.
Yeah, and what are the cables rated for?
Right.
I mean, it's and you have a poor Google engineer has to personally review every one of them.
And it's not only that, but you get situations where to save money, you might have like 2 or 3 USB-C ports on a device, but one of them is basically just like a USB 3.0 port. One is a video port. One is super high speed, that can be used for networking, as opposed to there are a lot of things I don't like about the ports on the MacBook Pro. But one things I absolutely respect is the idea that nope, these are four absolutely equal, top of the line. You can do anything with them ports.
Yeah, I do. I have to admit that. I stayed with the 2015, as I see you have, MacBook Pro, because I wish it had Type-C Thunderbolt, but the fact that it has USB and HDMI and an SD card reader.
SD cards, yeah.
I know. That actually is a compelling thing to have those ports.
For me, it's literally just the MagSafe. I would give up everything else. It's just.
Oh, I wish it had Type-C charging. I would prefer Type-C charging because it's universal now.
No, my problem is that I just travel so much. Being able to. And here's where it really becomes an issue where I look down and I go, I don't want. Is when I'm on a plane, plugging into the little. The connector there.
This pinpoints why it's so hard for Apple. And you kind of brought this up, Andy, too. As the only source of Macs, they have a problem because they can't make you and me happy. Right? You want the MagSafe, I want Type-C.
Well,
Rene's happy with 4 Thunderbolt ports.
I think that if Apple had if Apple had just left the right side of the computer the same and put 2 Cs on the other side, that's what
Lenovo does. They have their traditional charger on one side and a Type-C charger on the other side.
Leave all the connectors on one side the same, put Type-C on the other side as the transition laptop. Right. If they had done that and then done whatever they're going to do.
That doesn't have any courage. There's no courage involved in it.
I wish they'd be a little more fearful.
To me, it always comes down to the keyboard. We'll talk actually a little bit about what Apple's plans are with MacBooks in just a little bit. I just thought we'd celebrate a little bit the 20th anniversary, 20 years ago, May 6th. By the way, they announced it May 6th, 1998. They didn't ship it till August, I think, of that year. It took a while for it to come out. But we immediately, that's roughly when, it was the same time frame as the launch of ZDTV. And we immediately ran out and bought as many Bondi Blue iMacs as we could get our hands on. Really nice computer for its time. Our show today brought to you by 23andMe. The 23 is your 23 unique pairs of chromosomes. 23 from mom, 23 from dad that make you, you. Those chromosomes tell the story of who you are, from your ancestry to your inherited health traits. And 23andMe lets you read that book, your favorite book in the world, the book of you. I did 23andMe when they first started a few years ago, and I love it. You can get it right now. In fact, this is a great Mother's Day gift. 75 detailed online reports about mom's genetic ancestry, inherited traits, how her genes can influence her health. The ancestry reports are so much fun. I can't give it to mom this year because I gave it to her for Christmas. And my sister. My whole family's done 23andMe. And it's great because you could share the information with other family members. It's just fascinating where your people came from, not just over the last couple of centuries, but over tens of thousands of years. Your haplogroups, your Neanderthal ancestry, what your DNA family is. Mom will love this. You can use the DNA Relative Finder tool to connect with new relatives. Isn't that awesome? And there's no blood, no needles, no visit to the doctor. You just spit into a little small saliva samples, all they require, and you'll get your results online within 6 to 8 weeks. 23andMe is a really exciting product, and I want you to try it, and I want you to get one for mom. Get one for mom and yourself. Now through the end of the week, through May 13th, you can get 20% off every kit and free gift wrap. 20% off and free gift wrap if you go to 23andme.com/twit. It's a great thing to do with your family, but, loved ones, children, 23andme.com/twit, and make it a special Mother's Day for mom. 23andme.com/twit. We thank 23andMe for their support of MacBreak Weekly. So let's talk MacBooks. Supply chain rumor, but I'll give it to you. By the way, Ming-Chi Kuo is leaving KGI Securities. He's going to stop giving us rumors.
No, they'll just have someone else at KGI exfiltrate that information from the supply chain. That wasn't a Ming-Chi Kuo thing. That was a KGI.
It was because KGI was in the right place, huh? All right.
Are you suggesting that he was the Dread Pirate Roberts?
No, I mean, it's just like
I know.
KGI needs information, and the people on the supply chain need certain things. When you put those together, you get information from the supply chain.
So that's because he says he's not going to cover Apple anymore. He's going to move to other spaces.
But they still have investors that need that coverage. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Digitimes, another source of regular source of supply chain information, somewhat less reliable, says that Apple has pushed back assembly of the new 12-inch MacBook into the third quarter. We were hoping to see, or 13-inch, I should say. We were hoping to see this 13-inch Retina MacBook around WWDC time. The price was supposed to be under $1,000, maybe even as low as $899. The report says supply chain partners are now stuck with piling inventories of parts until Apple gives the go-ahead. Rene?
I mean, this happens. A couple of years ago, the Apple TV was supposed to debut at WWDC, and it got pushed back till the September event. 2 years ago, the MacBook Pros, the new design MacBook Pro, was supposed to debut at WWDC, and it got pushed back to the September event. And those happen. Sometimes it's software. In the case of Apple TV, in the case of the MacBook Pros, I believe they were left waiting on Intel, because Intel has to not only ship the Coffee Lake in this case, they've got to ship the quad cores or whatever the exact processors Apple needs. Then Apple works with Intel to do things like Power Nap and the other features, because they deeply integrate, and they're integrating their own T chips now as well, which are handling some of the tasks and have to communicate with the operating system. So it takes them a little bit of time. And if all that stuff is not on schedule, they're not going to wait till 2 weeks after WWDC or 6 weeks after. They'll just wait till the next event. So that's entirely believable to me.
It probably is chips, but I have this fantasy that somebody called Tim Cook and said, Tim, we can't sell these butterfly keys anymore. We've got to put a real keyboard on this thing.
This doesn't have it. This one doesn't have it. The MacBook Air has the old keyboard.
You think it will?
It will if it's not a complete redesign. I mean, it depends on how aggressive they get with it. But if they want to make it $800, I don't think. The problem is the MacBook is still so expensive they can't drop the price to $1,000. And I mean expensive in terms of what it costs Apple to make those keyboards, to make those Terrace drives, all the different components in there. It's an expensive machine to build for them, and the MacBook Air is not. So if they change it too much, it becomes expensive and beats the purpose.
So okay. So I've conflated two things. There's a 12-inch MacBook.
Yes.
That's the $899 one.
MacBook Nothing. Yes.
The MacBook Nothing is $1,200 or $1,500.
Okay, so it's not just me, because 9 to 5 Mac says the price of the new 13-inch MacBook is expected to be around $899. But they're thinking they've made a mistake. They mean the MacBook Air there. That's the one that'll be less expensive.
They're talking about the Air, yeah. The next gen Air. I mean, unless Apple changes the name, Apple can call it whatever they want. They could call it MacBook Edition if they want to.
It's also confusing because, frankly, they both fill the same niche, roughly, right?
I think the MacBook was supposed to replace the MacBook Air the way the MacBook Air replaced the MacBook, but again, the costs have not come down, and that's a problem 3 years after production.
Yeah, I find it hard to believe that it wouldn't be a complete redesign. It really is the MacBook Air really is a monument to everything that Apple and now pretty much everybody else has walked away from in the past 4 years. So I'd be really surprised if it didn't have the new keyboard design. I'd be really surprised. I'd be surprised if it weren't simply a MacBook Nothing, but with the cost savings of not having to make it so thin, not having to make it so small, and with some convenience features that they think that they can't delete in a $900 computer.
I still have this fantasy that Apple, because I do think there is one piece of evidence that makes this not a complete fantasy, which is that these butterfly keys break. And they're not reliable, and they're hard to repair.
It's even worse than that, because we got actually Apple Insider did a great job. They contacted a bunch of Apple Store geniuses and a bunch of third-party suppliers, and they got actual numbers. And there was a spike in repairs in 2016, which looks enormous because the reliability of the MacBook Pro in general went way down. So the difference is bigger than it actually is. But by 2017, it was roughly in line with the previous years. But the perception problem is so bad, it's so toxic, it's such a negative sentiment that I think Apple has to address it. And regardless of what you think about the mechanism, you have, I don't know what percentage of people, but people like Andy who don't just not like it, but actively hate it. And when you're a single vendor, you can't have products that a portion of your user base actively hates. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, but that's the same problem I was talking about. Some people actively love it. So you can't.
Yeah, but nobody minded the old one. I mean, that was a good middle ground. Nobody
Actively, I don't know anybody that actively loves the butterfly keys. I think that
Lisa does.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
I do too. Jim Dalrymple does, but I mean, you can't have a divide like that. Almost everybody was okay with the previous keyboard. Nobody loved it. Nobody hated it. Well, some people loved it, but nobody hated it.
And I think I think that when I was traveling with the little 12-inch and I got kind of used to it, so it wasn't like a horrible thing. But the problem is I have like a DOS keyboard at home with a clickety-clack.
I know. It makes a big difference.
So on my iMac, I have that. And then when I go to this laptop, it's like this. It feels like you're just tapping on like a cloth.
Yeah.
Even with this one. And then when you go to that one, it just feels like you're tapping on glass. And so I think there is this problem that if you have a real keyboard, which by the way, I would highly, I mean, I still love.
I would use the MacBook. I love the form factor on the MacBook is fantastic, and I would put up with the fact that there's only one port if it had a decent keyboard.
Yeah,
it's okay. I mean, people are sick and tired of all the times I talk about this particular subject. All I'll say is that I think the MacBook is brilliant, not even despite that keyboard, but because of that keyboard. Because the purpose of the MacBook Nothing is, I'm willing to make sacrifices to have something that is so small and so light that the convenience factor is going to trump any inconvenience that I feel about having only one port or having a keyboard that's suboptimal. But I would put it a little bit more strongly than a perception problem. This really is an actual problem for so many of the people who have the earlier generation keyboards. I think the jury is a little bit still out on the new keyboards, but it's when you have Apple needs to come back and make sure that people know that if you have a problem with this keyboard, it's not going to, and it breaks down 1 month after your warranty lapses, it's not going to cost you $800 to finally have a space bar again. They should basically make an exception for this and say that if it was damaged that was due to the design of this keyboard, we're not necessarily going to have a recall of this, but it's on us. It's a consistent enough problem that these aren't just flukes that people have these problems. It is a consistent design problem. And I believe that they can afford to simply eat the cost of replacing that keyboard every time that someone says there's a failure. It wasn't because we put lime juice on it and the rice didn't work. It's because yeah.
So all right. So WWDC's coming up 3 weeks. You think there'll be a refresh of anything at WWDC?
Last year we had the MacBook Pros and we had the MacBook or the 12-inch MacBook. We had the MacBook Pros and we had the iMac. So everything got the Skylake, not the Skylake, sorry, the Kaby Lake update last year. So hopefully we have some Coffee Lake love this year.
All right.
I think if anything, we'll see at least a teaser preview of something that they will promise that will ship by the end of the year or early 2019. Yeah, exactly.
I think we're going to get to see a sneak preview of the new operating system.
Mac OS.
Well,
just like.
Well, we know we'll see that. And iOS 12, Mac OS. I don't know what it wouldn't be Mac OS 11.
It's Mac OS 12.4. Sorry, 10.4. Is it 13 or 14 this year? 14.
It's so confusing.
They dropped the numbers, so it was hard to remember.
They can never go to 11.
Exactly.
Right?
Now my mind goes to mountain ranges. I have to look it up every time.
Maybe Craig will finally get OS 10 weed. Sorry, Mac OS weed. He'll just he's been teasing it for so many years.
All right, so that's good. That's something to wait for at WWDC. And we should mention.
I think it's worth pointing out that Apple's an incredibly number-oriented company. So they have the complete data on the keyboards. They see all the numbers, and they follow how many repairs they're doing on each one of them. And they did an extended replacement program for the battery on the Escape Key version already. And it really is internally a factor of it hits this number, we do this program. It hits this number, we do this program. If it hits this number, then we do this program. And everything as of last month at least, it hadn't approached those numbers. And that's why I just said it's a perception problem. Not that the issues people are having aren't bad. I had to replace the keyboard, ironically, of the previous generation MacBook Pro, and I had to pay, I think, $500 for it. But it's an issue that because so many people don't like it as well, that I think the entire thing has become toxic. And I think Apple can't just look at the numbers. They have to actually look at the sentiment around that computer and make a decision beyond just the raw numbers in this case.
So there may be something.
I'll say that the keyboard is not yet the equivalent of the Twiggy drive, but it's starting to drift into the same conversational cloud.
Yeah. Well, good. Maybe there is hope. Maybe it's not just a fantasy.
All I know is that I still have in storage not the 2015, but I think the 2013 MacBook that I spilled like the Diet Dr. Pepper into. that's still in the box. And now I'm like, maybe this is going to be like when there was a last generation of stereo amps that used this special kind of tuner that is the best that was ever made. So maybe it's actually going to be worth
like
taking
that.
it someplace and having it fixed, just to have the last one that had like really good ports and like the SD card slot and a better trackpad and a better keyboard.
Steve Gibson have a bunch of Palm 5s or something in the freezer?
He used to. I wonder if he still does. So you can still get effectively the same 2015. Apple still sells it for $2,000.
Not the 13-inch anymore, just the 15-inch.
Just
now.
the 15. Yeah. I could see Apple maybe revving this and saying it's a classic. And put a coffee lake in here.
At some point, though, that's an admission that there's a large segment of your
there's
population.
admission that because they're still selling it. That is an admission, right? They are still selling it.
Yeah.
Well,
it's also, with the.
they're going to have to still support the models that they were selling the previous years. They know that there are still people that a certain setup is a no-go in regard to ports. They've already got the tooling, they've already got the engineering. It costs them very little to keep selling it. We've seen this before where they'll keep like the old models still in the lineup just because at this point there isn't any particularly compelling reason to delete a model out of the lineup. I don't think that's an admission of guilt or an admission of a lack of engineering in the new models.
Well, and if somebody's willing to pay
like
$2,000 for it, why not still sell it?
I think like the overall part is that they admitted they made a mistake. They painted themselves into a thermal corner with the Mac Pro, and they're doing a redo with a modular Mac Pro. They're going to rebirth the MacBook Air because they haven't been able to get the MacBook to where they wanted it to get, or at least it looks that way. And there you have the keyboard issues with these computers, and it just you start to think you got to really reset the Mac. It's not just resetting individual SKUs, but you've got to figure out 3 years from now, 5 years from now, what you want that product to look like and what range of customers you want to service with them, and then position it so that you have something for all of those customers.
Do you think that's
Otherwise,
happening? Do you think that they're doing that?
I think the iMac Pro was a start. I think the modular Mac Pro, if it ships in a timely fashion, is a start, especially because a Pro display is something they don't really have to do. I mean, I'm really happy they are doing it, but it's something that, again, draws resources from other things. But they believe now it's really important that they service the complete, because you look at the computer, the display is the front of that computer. It's the human interface for that computer, and they know it's now important to make that. And I think it still was a mistake that they didn't make a higher end MacBook Pro, something that was like the same way they made the Escape Key one on the low end. They should have made a high end one that had more powerful graphics, even if at the expense of battery life, and had more RAM options, even if it wasn't low power RAM. All of those things, because that is important to the Mac community, and I think that's the part that they're starting to realize and what they're doing with their Pro team and working on. I hope it pays off.
I think if they really wanted to make a higher power, more powerful Mac, they'd have to use an NVIDIA card. Sorry,
they don't get along with NVIDIA because NVIDIA wants to control everything and Apple wants to control everything, and they're at loggerheads.
I understand that they don't get along, but the ATI cards are just not the same.
I know.
They are not the same.
So this is really the bigger, not the question of whether Apple's going to merge Mac OS or iOS or whether they're going to dump the Mac. I think it's not going to do anything at that extreme, but there is this kind of nibbling away at what the importance of the Mac. It's not as important, and there's this nibbling away.
Well,
you just feel like they're not paying attention.
I think one thing, I was talking to a startup entrepreneur that's doing pretty well. They've got 70 people working for them or whatever, and we were talking about coding or coders. And I think that we forget that right now, all of Silicon Valley, the whole world, is under this huge constraint called they just don't have enough engineering staff.
Right.
And so when we think about where they're putting their money, Apple's making most of its money in iOS, and the phones and everything else, and that's where they're putting most of their engineering resources. So when these things all go slow, when something doesn't go as fast as we want it to,
you think it's just lack of engineering?
They literally can't. Yeah. They can't get them, and when they do, the problem is that another person I was talking to a couple of weeks ago was saying, the problem is that you get these coders and they work the hours they want to work, they do what they're going to do, they show up. There's some that work really hard, he said, but there's a lot of them that are just kind of.
You need those A-list guys or gals, and there's a limited number of people. And
they said there's a lot of people who can write code. There's not a lot of people who can write can architect
the
code.
Andy Hertzfelds of the world, the Bill Atkinsons.
There's another thing too, and a lot of those people also want to work on, they want to make the next iPhone. They don't want to make the 15th Mac. But beyond that, there's a problem with data. And there was this great West Wing quote once where they said, I'm a pollster. I look at this data. I don't know what it means. Does it mean you're doing too much, or you're not doing enough? And I think that's one of the problems too, is that Apple looked at the Macs that we're buying, and predominantly those Macs were not the high-end Macs. There was so many people. Apple was going mainstream. The iPhone was a huge halo effect. More and more people were buying Macs, and more people were buying what would be considered mainstream Macs. So they started saying, well, if we make the MacBook Pro more like this, the mainstream audience will like it more. We'll sell more Macs. And they did. For all accounts, they were selling more Macs. But that is not the Mac that they were known for, that their traditional customers wanted. And the data told them that this would make more Macs, but it wouldn't make more Mac customers happy. And I think that's the misstep that they're trying to counter now.
Good. I mean, I know emotionally, I have no doubt emotionally that everybody at Apple cares deeply about the Mac. That's not what, but there's just so many pressures from so many different places, lack of engineers, the fact that iPhone makes so much money, so much more money than the Macintosh.
And you can't be a day late with iPhone. Like, that thing has got to ship.
The Intel, there's the problem that Intel can't, we just found out there's 8 more Spectre flaws. I'm sure in the perfect world, if Apple had all the engineers it needed and did what it would be designing its own chips, making a brand new Mac with its own chips, and but that may be 10 years off. That's a hard thing to do.
All I can say is that Apple had absolutely no experience in the luxury watch jewelry market. They figured out how to make and sell a $12,000 gold gadget watch. They somehow managed to create when they saw that it was important for them to make an inexpensive iPad so they can continue to compete in education and for other goals, they found a way to not only make a $329 iPad, but make a $329 iPad that is competitive with the iPad Pro. This is a company that has proven that if they want to do something, it gets done. If they're not putting the Macintosh forward into making it a current product, an important product, it's because this is not something that they are highly motivated to do. It's not about resources. It's not about time. It's not about markets. This is simply not something that they're interested in doing. Unless, again, we're at some sort of WWDC, and because of Apple not talking about something until it's done, they take the wraps off of the most kick-butt Mac Mini or the most wonderful iMac they've ever made, and a retooling of Mac OS that is like a breath of fresh air, like a butterfly coming out of a cocoon. That's the situation that I have to believe in right now. It's not they're moving forward because, again, this isn't a blame thing. This isn't an accusation thing. They are not interested in making a modern Mac.
Yeah, I think it's a little more complicated, only in that they have to take somebody off A to do B, and that's fine, but then you don't get A, and they make those choices. Like if we move these people over to the Mac, we don't get that iPad that's cheap, and right now we'd love to make this Mac, but that iPad is more important to us. And John Ternes is working on the iMac Pro, so he's not working on the MacBook Air, and the iMac Pro took this long, so now we have to shift them back to the and it's all these decisions every day, and it's not that they don't want to do it, it's just that when you have to do these 5 different things and you can do 4 of them, Mac is always the one that seems to end up being 5th.
That's just an excuse. Again,
I don't think so. I think that's
Did they? I'm saying that did they pull people off of something to make a $329 iPad? Yes, they did. Did they pull people off something else to make sure that iOS got released on time? Yes, they did. Did they pull someone off something else to make sure the Apple Watch was on schedule? Yes, they did. This is a company that we've just talked about had the most successful quarter of their history. They make so much money that they're even bored of having money fights, even when they went from $50 bills to bundles of $100 bills. They can make this happen if they were motivated to make this happen. They have self-driving car technology that they're building because they're interested in making this happen.
Why aren't they interested? Again, if that's the case, why aren't they more interested in the Mac?
I mean, I don't know. And I'm not going to guess. I'm just saying that my belief, what I see, and my belief is that, again, if they were as excited about the Mac as they are about all these other things, it would have happened, just like the Apple Watch happened, just like the iPads happened, just like the self-driving car happened. All these things happen because they said, screw it, I know that we're not ready for this, but we're going to make it ready for it right now. This is too many years and too little effort, visible effort to moving the Mac forward to simply say, oh gosh, I know they're really excited and they want to do this, but they just don't have enough manpower, they don't have enough resources, they don't have enough bandwidth in their brains. No, they could do it if they wanted to. On some level, they've decided that this is not a priority of any kind for them.
Well, I don't know if it's a priority of any kind, but I do think that if you look at the revenue numbers, it makes sense that they would spend more energy on the things that are making more money. And also when you look at the long-term trajectory, the only reason my kids want to have a Mac is so that they can design levels in Roblox. And if Roblox let them do it on the iPad, they would never need to see a computer.
I would guess Roblox is working hard to make that happen.
I guess. I don't know.
Company
but
who's
it's
not would be missing
because they sit there and they play the whole game. They spend all this time on their iPad.
There's other pressure on Apple. I know you don't want to hazard a guess, Andy, but I'll hazard a guess. Yesterday, we saw Google announce a lot of stuff, including a very much improved Google Assistant. I don't know if that's ever going to ship. Demos always look great. But they're really falling behind. Siri's already behind Amazon Echo. And Google seems like it's taken the race entirely. Oops, I wasn't talking to you, Google. My assistants popped up. Google's Android P actually borrows from the iPhone. They now have the gesture, the swipe side-to-side gesture that Apple pioneered in the iPhone 10. There's a lot of pressure on the phone, and if the phone's your bread and butter, you're gonna actually, I think, all hands on deck. If there's an all hands on deck, it's not to save the Mac.
Right. Well, and I think that I do think that there's probably some opinion of the Mac is legacy hardware.
I think they think it can putt along.
No, I don't know.
It's going to keep putting along.
It's not that it's not going to keep.
We don't have
along,
to do much,
and they need it. You still can't write code. You still can't make iPhone apps.
We'll put
without
a coffee like
the Mac,
It'll keep putting along.
But it's not something that's not the growth market, and I don't think it will be. I don't think that if we look at the trajectory of PCs in general, we look at my kids or you look at folks that are retired, and those two ends have just gotten rid of the Mac. There's a handful of us that still need it. In fact, if I wasn't doing graphics, I don't know if I would use.
What about an iOS device? What about doing what Google's done, which is basically with a Chromebook, kind of made a dumbed down laptop? What about?
I feel like an iPad Pro with a keyboard is pretty darn close to that.
That's what I'm saying. What about doing that? What about making a kind of an iOS laptop? What about abandoning Mac OS? And admitting that you need to do coding, you need a good keyboard, you need Xcode, but why don't you have
I think that's where we're going. I mean, I think that's I think that there are things I think.
And then you can use your own processors. You're not tied to Intel. It seems like I don't know. I mean, we're trying to put ourselves in the mindset of Apple, and that's not an easy thing to do.
I mean, I think a lot of times there are. A lot of times in business, you have kind of three states that are happening in most businesses. There's the things that you want to get to, that you're investing heavily into to get to it. There are the things that pay the bills today, and then there are things that they're kind of the caboose. Like if it fell off, it wouldn't kill you, and you're still doing it. You're still because it's still making money, but it's not something you pay a lot of attention to. And I think a lot of companies just keep circling that. That's like a big tank track of what's in front, and then that thing that's in front is now in the middle, and then the thing that was in the middle is now you're trying to get rid of. And I think for Apple, when you look at the AR, VR, self-driving, all that stuff is kind of out in the front. The iPhone's in the middle, and the Mac is in the back.
Caboose.
Yeah,
and that makes sense. I wouldn't even say that's bad business, or it's just disappointing to those of us who like Macs and want to use Macs.
Totally.
I'm fine. I'm fine with. I guess I don't have any attachment to my Mac other than I can't. I don't. There's
I
a
don't
lot
want
of
to
things
use
I can't
Windows.
Do.
No,
I'm saying I can see myself moving someday to iOS and not looking back on it. I don't think I'd move. I have Windows machines. I have Linux machines.
I'll tell you where Mac OS for me is really great, and it's the BSD, the Unix under the hood, and the command line, and the ability to run Unix apps, and you're not going to have that on iOS. And from a code, if you care about reaching out to engineers, and if there is an engineering shortage, and I have to say most engineers I think use Macs, most coders use Macs, you need to keep that group happy about being in the Apple fold.
And again, I think that's going to take a long time before anything happens. I mean, I think that just because they're not growing.
Linux is sitting out there, and then Linux is a decent option. You can get so many different PC manufacturers, so many different form factors, very innovative stuff. Most of them will run Linux very well. I do see a lot of people in the developer community moving to Linux, but I think that Mac OS is such a great development platform.
Yep.
Well, it just shows it's interesting to see what Microsoft and Google and other companies are doing with the laptop form factor. Chromebooks are just getting more and more interesting every year. One piece of news from Google I/O was that by the summer, Chrome OS is going to support Linux apps. So not only does it run Chrome apps, if Chrome apps aren't doing it for you, it also now runs Android apps. But also, if you just want to download a free Office suite or free Photoshop,
you can put Debian on your Chromebook. Without compromising security, by the way.
because it runs in basically sort of not an emulation mode, but sort of a virtualization mode that sandboxes that entire environment. It makes just as a person who's interested in such things and writes about such things, it really has for the first time put a decent Chromebook on my shopping list.
Oh yeah.
For the summer, just because I want to see how well that works day to day. As a $500 laptop that doesn't have anything that you don't really need as just a regular ham and eggs type of laptop user, that's an intriguing move.
Let's talk about news, because one of the things Google did do is roll out their new news app. I've been playing with it. I really like it. I'm not sure why, but it looks like both Google and Apple have decided that one of the next fronts is news. We saw an article today that says Apple is quietly building a news operation, an editorial news operation. That they bought Texture. They've shut down Texture for Windows, which I think is probably a precursor to shutting down Texture entirely.
Well, I think that
they're a sponsor. We should say.
Windows wasn't being updated for a long time, and it sounds like it was just a problem child that Apple just wasn't willing. We're not going to. You either close it or you make it better, and they didn't want to make it better.
Right.
They just got out of quick time.
I think though that the plan, which they've even telegraphed, is of rolling it into news, means that the app itself is probably on the chopping block. I'd like to see a strong news. I have to see. So you like it, the Android news app? You've been playing with it?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I had it on my iPad Mini in bed last night, and because Chrome is my default browser, it was already very, very good at. I like the idea of making it explicit, the difference between here are headlines, meaning that this is not being influenced whatsoever by what we think you want to see. This is just what everyone sees. And then another tab that says for you, meaning this is stuff that is influenced by what we think you want to see. And so not only was the for you tab full of stories that either I'd already read by seeking them out and by looking at by people I follow on my Twitter feed, but the headlines tab, I really like the fact that it was full of good protein. Not a website you've never heard of whose journalism game is being paid less than its search engine optimization game, but good trusted sources, even stuff that I had not known about before, hadn't realized before. And it's a very, very nice interface. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Apple tends to bring for that. It was a really big chunk of Google's keynote yesterday as part of the, hey, yes, we're a big dragon, but we are the friendly dragon from How to Train Your Dragon. We're not the angry, set fire to 100 people dragon from Game of Thrones like Facebook is. And so this is a role that a big company like Apple can play to actually do something that's very, very good for people. It serves a need that people are very concerned about, that is news being manipulated and not having any idea of the pedigree of what they're reading. And it's a place where a free app can do a lot of good. So I'm really excited to see knowing what Apple is doing with a lot of hands-on stuff, a lot of hands-on human brains attacking the problem. I'm really keen to see what they show off.
Yeah, I mean, I knew they were hiring editorial people because, of course, they hired Nathan Oliver-Giles away from us. And when he said, I just got a job offer from Apple, I couldn't say, well, stay here. That's exciting. And he while he can't really tell us what he's doing, it's clear he's in editorial. He's not there to make, the next version of iOS. And apparently Apple's been putting it. There's a whole bunch of job listings for editorial types. I think that's really, I think that's very interesting. Apple News jobs over time spiked, what looks like in October of last year. They're back down to normal levels, but they did a lot of hiring. So I guess that's when they hired Nathan, right? Right about there.
Yeah. So. And a lot of it, it's a more complicated problem than it might originally sound, because one of the things they have to do is make sure that the publishers are very, very happy with the product. Google had been getting a lot of flack by doing something that is a very nice feature for users. If you're searching for a piece of news in Google, in the Google search engine, it will not only find the relevant articles, but it will also summarize in one block at the very, very top. Oh, here's the information you probably wanted to get, so don't even bother clicking through to any of these links and visiting the Washington Post. So they're making a very, very hard sell to saying no. It will give the user the headline and basically the lead, but then when they tap, they go to your site, to your content. Also, we're going to make it very, very easy for people within the app to simply touch one button that says subscribe, and suddenly they're a Washington Post online products or subscriber. So Apple is going to have to address that as well.
Yeah, credit, by the way, to Joshua Fruhlinger of thinknum.com doing big data journalism, because he's the guy who went through all of Apple's hiring listings to create some interesting numbers. That's
and
good.
if Apple News ever does a comics page, they need to hire Josh. His comic strip blog is pretty incredible.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, awesome. What else? A USA Today reporter, Jefferson Graham, used the new GDPR to ask Apple for a data dump. You can do that now. He said it took 8 days for Apple to give me the data it had collected on me, and it wasn't very much. He got 243 megabytes from Google, 881 megabytes with the same request from Facebook. Apple, it was only 9 megabytes. He says there's not much there because Apple says the information is primarily kept on your device, not its servers. A list of downloads, purchases, and repairs. No search history. It does. Apple does keep the Siri requests, but they didn't give it to him because they say it's anonymized. It's no longer personal information because we take your Siri request and we put a unique identifier on it, but it's not an individual. It uses a random identifier to mask your identity. So they did not offer that back to him, and that's the kind of stuff you would get back from Google as all your Google Assistant requests.
It's just not part of Apple's business model, and in fact, it's part of their business model to not grab onto it. So I think they're doing everything they can.
The company says it doesn't want your information and it doesn't store it, and so there you go. Now,
I think that's going to be a really interesting, not battle, but basically the Coke versus Pepsi of Apple selling something that people really, really want, which is that yes, if you filter most of your stuff through us, you're filtering it through a company that does not monetize your information in any way. We don't sell it. And we work very, very hard not to keep it so that nothing bad can happen because it's destroyed or anonymized as soon as we get it, versus Google's story of, yes, we're collecting a lot of information about you, but look at all the really great services we can provide for you. It means that when you ask for a restaurant recommendation, we can actually try to figure out of these 7 different. You asked for a place to get a cheap Thai within a mile of where I am right now, but it will pick the one that it thinks that you're going to like the most. That's the sort of stuff that the second or third time it delivers the goods for you, and after you're the frog in the pot of water that's getting a little bit hotter, you realize that, okay, it's the water's pretty warm, but I'm not worried yet. It's going to be interesting to see how consumers choose between those two options.
It was fun to watch Google I/O yesterday because the word privacy never came up, and they showed all sorts of stuff that Assistant can do based on what it knows about you, and they didn't unapologetically.
Well, I think there's also.
Go ahead.
I just think there could be exactly what Andy's talking about, a huge separation in populations at some point, where you have people who really want an iPhone and really want to do that themselves and don't want to, and want to be private, and then you have people who are willing to give up that data so that they have ease of use or lower costs.
So does that mean Siri will always be a weak second to Google Assistant?
I don't think it'll be as strong. I think it'll be almost impossible. There's certain things that I think would be very hard just from unless Apple. I mean, literally, Apple could catch up if they took that $100 billion they're using for their buyback and spend it on Maps. Right. They might actually be able to catch up. I mean, because Maps is still a disaster. I mean, it's like when you actually. I mean, there's so many times.
Yesterday, Google showed how they're going to implement augmented reality in Maps. So when you're walking around, this is always a problem for me. I can never figure out if I'm headed the right way.
Yep.
Now you'll hold it up,
and I think
you'll show the street and say, "Go that way."
I think that's going to come on the. I think that'll be on iOS soon. I mean, there's been tests. People have been testing. Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of data that you can throw money at. But I think the hard part is the kind of data you get when there's just so many people using it. And
Google has all this ML, machine learning, going into what they're doing. I suppose Apple does, but Google's really highlighting the fact that they're doing this.
Well, they just have more people doing it. I mean, the thing is,
but they also hired the best people, right?
They both have really good people working for them, I think. But I think that the issue is that there's so many people using the Google apps that the granularity of data that's being fed to them on a day-to-day basis is so high that it's now on the iOS. I think the reports are that 60% of the people that have an iPhone are using the Apple Maps. It's just that every time I use it, because when I use it is because someone texts me their address, and if you click on it, it automatically opens up Maps, and so that's usually my introduction to, I'm going to give it a shot again. And then and then I end up on a dead end street
because it goes to the watch, and the watch will tell me turn left or right.
So,
I mean,
so
there's
like,
little things
if
like
I'm driving, but generally I have to admit I'm still, because it not every time I use it, but a high number of times that I use the Apple Maps, I end up with a dead end, or I end up in some kind of funky turn. And with Google, I oftentimes I always say I don't trust the Google girl sometimes. Like, she'll tell me to take the Bay Bridge from the airport, and I'll be like, that sounds crazy. And then I'm on 19th in some kind of horrible traffic jam and going, okay, well, she was right. Damn.
Is the car going to be the battlefront, though, or walking and bicycling and mass transit? I have to say, in Japan, being able to use Google, the Japanese subway, there's not a lot of English. You have to kind of figure it out.
What I did is I have names for everything.
But the Google Maps was great. It told me exactly where to get off, what to do. Yeah. I mean, it really was a great companion.
It's not just that. It's subtle things like just simply identifying streets and identifying places, because it's relatively on the spectrum of difficulty. It's very, very easy to identify that there is a drugstore right here. Here's the street number, so here's the street. Here's where the number should be, so it's right here. Very difficult to say that, no, here is the entrance. Technically it's on this street, but you have to go through this little back way to get there. And there are a lot of places one of my big problems is that I always think that my understanding of the world comes from living in New England specifically, and America in general. There are places in the world where just street layouts just don't work that way. As torturous as Boston street layouts are, I mean, it's well just documented. It's well set up. Google is putting a lot of money into not just going with mathematics here, but also how can we basically incorporating 3D image views, satellite image views, to actually now they have a look at what that street looks like. There are buildings there that don't really appear on the street plan. There are business and using Street View to also just do reading to say not only here's a picture associated with this numeric street address, but we're going to figure out that my existing I've identified this as a barbershop based on the signage here. I'm going to basically add this to the database that didn't exist before. So it's the quality of the information, especially in a very, very tough and challenging environment, that shows how deeply invested Google is in maps, and also machine learning. It's with Sundar Pichai. You often hear, every time you hear a CEO talk during a keynote, there's a certain amount of nodding and saying, okay, this will be interesting if it's actually true. But a few years ago, when he rather bravely said that, no, we're saying that the Google used to be a search company, now we're an artificial intelligence machine learning company. And 3 years later, we see, no, every single thing that they do is leveraged by machine learning. By so much of what they were doing yesterday was actually counteracting the bad press that their competitors in various markets were creating. So they didn't actually say that you can trust our self-driving cars because we're not dabblers like a certain car sharing service that we could mention. Okay, Uber. They make a point of we have 6 million miles of actual road travel plus something like 9 billion miles. They're saying of simulated road travel. Our systems are really, really much smarter because again we're not dabblers in this. So that's an interesting component to all of this.
Well, and I think that the math for Google is easy. I mean, if you're sitting in a car, you're not searching Google. So I mean, that's
you out of the car as fast
if you start doing get you looking down. Like a self-driving car just gives people a lot more time to be searching. I mean, those are. I mean, if you think about the number of hours and the number of ads served up or not served up, it makes the Waymo really cheap.
Apple is cracking down on applications that send location data to third parties. This just started happening over the last couple of days. A number of applications have been booted because their applications in violation of Apple Store guidelines pertaining to transmission of location data to third parties. And so this once again, Apple's doubling down on privacy. It's very clear. They're also, I thought this was quite interesting, and this comes from somebody parsing the source code of the next of the beta version of 11.4. I like this. Apparently, if you don't unlock your phone after a week, you no longer can use the Lightning port. And
for data, but you can still use it for charging, supposedly.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is particularly aimed at the gray key law enforcement, which might have a phone that hasn't been accessed for a while. They can't suck the data out of it.
The downside of this, of course, is that if you had let's say an iPad sitting around for a while and and then you forgot the password, you're done. Like, it is a brick.
Right.
Like, unless Apple's got some secret backdoor, which sounds like they're not going to. The issue you'll have with this is that if it was sitting around you went away for 2 weeks to Japan, let's say, and you come back and for some reason you got the password wrong, or
I have one that's a brick because I can't remember the password now.
I have two that I have to take into the Apple Store.
Do?
You can take them in, they can plug them in.
The Apple Store. Well, I bet you the Apple Store could override this too.
Okay, well they're saying no, because if the Apple Store can do it, so can the gray key. I mean, so that's it's not all upside to that process.
I'm not challenging you. I'm just saying this is an area where if I knew that if you yourself have completely forgotten the passcode to enter an iOS device, that there's a way to get it back that doesn't involve factory resetting it and then connecting it to iCloud and restoring, I will learn something new by finding out how to do that, because I'm not aware of how that can be done.
To fix it?
I'm saying if you want to a way of getting that password or that pin back.
Don't forget your password is what he's saying.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's all encrypted, and I don't know of a way to get at it.
The Apple Store can get. I mean, right. So the problem that I have, for instance, I have two kids.
You have
that
to
I got
prove
them iPads.
You own
I got
it,
my
though.
kids. Oh no, I have to prove that I own them.
No, that's the problem I have. I have an iPad that we bought for some employee here. I got it back. I can't unlock it, and I don't know where the receipt is or anything.
I have to admit, that's why
it's a brick.
I always buy everything at the Apple Store because it always has my history, and it's
we
all
might
registered.
Have the history there, actually, yeah.
And so the problem, I never buy it anywhere. I don't buy any Apple products anywhere than the Apple Store, because I just know that if I go in, they'll immediately have it all there, and I do all the registration.
You bought it.
I bought them for my kids, and my kids, of course, they put passwords on them so the other one couldn't get into them. So and they forgot them, and then
of course, kids always do. So that's the point of this then. That even Apple couldn't unlock this. That after a week, this thing is
Well, it also takes Apple off the whole.
Which they want to be.
And I think that there's an argument that says, I think this is the beginning of this. I think they could say one day, or you have to type it in. I can see Apple saying you have to type in your password, or the lightning bolt doesn't work. I mean, I think there's a lot of
kill switch.
Basically, if I don't put my password in, or if I don't put my password in, you can't.
You can't suck data
even if I just handed you the code.
Yeah.
I would prefer that right now. Like I would take it. I know what my password is. And so my preference would be just if I don't just like when you want to go into photos, it says you got to.
The issue. Password recovery is a vulnerability. So if you really want secure, you make sure that if you lose it, you lost it. You're out of luck.
Right. I would love to have an option to just be like you can't use the Lightning port if it's not logged in. If it wasn't logged in when it was connected.
I really want to highlight, this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love Apple. This is not a problem that is going to affect a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Okay. And this does nothing, it protects the consumer, even consumers that might legitimately might be under the quite legitimate view of the investigation by the law. But it essentially says that we are not on law enforcement's side. We are not going to simply, if there is a way of getting into our devices that bypasses all the security that we've put in to make sure that only appropriate authorized people can use it, we are going to shut that down, even if this is a tool that is mostly being used by law enforcement. And at a time when they're dealing with an administration that the FBI has been actively looking for ways to start this fight and have a court decide that that encryption is not legal, that companies have to maintain a way of allowing law enforcement into any device, no matter what the user has done to protect their data. That is that is real courage. That is very real courage. Because people who are advocating for all the things all the way to Apple should put in a back door to every single iPhone and iOS device that will automatically unlock the doors to everything to law enforcement. Those people might think of this as a thumb right in their eye. Even though, again, Apple just wants to protect the needs of consumers. That is, again, real bravery. Because if the FBI, we have a Congress and an administration that I don't know what they wouldn't do at this point. And so, if they were to make this into an issue that we are going to bet the survival of your company on your ability to fight this law, things could be very, very itchy. There's no diplomacy here that Apple is offering. They're saying this is our principle. We are fighting for this principle, and guess what? We could fight this for 10 years. We believe that the government will run out of funding before we will run out of funding for this lawsuit.
I have to apologize. I know people are saying, "Where's Rene?" He's still here, but he's in a conference call right now. We don't want to force him to comment, so he is with us, but only in spirit, not in body and soul. Apple has announced that starting in July, all iOS app updates submitted to the App Store have to be built with the iOS 11 SDK and have to support the Super Retina display of the iPhone 10, moving developers along. Apple's very good at this. It's nice if you have a monopoly. And finally, before we take a break, I want to point out a very good article you're going to want to read. Cover story in the Honky magazine that just came out. Honky is a watch enthusiast website, and they have a publication at Honky, HODINKEE.com. Kevin Rose is the CEO of Honky. Apple, Influence, and Ive, one of the few interviews I've ever seen with Jony Ive, specifically talking about the watch, and some very interesting stuff in here. Jony Ive, for instance, said that Steve and he had never talked about making a watch. He said, as far as I know, Jony said, Steve never even owned a watch, which is actually in contrary to this picture, this famous picture of Steve Jobs with the original iMac, and he's wearing a Seiko. In fact, the guy who wrote the article apparently was trying to bid to buy that Seiko. And lost to somebody who bid $42,500. The author says, forever since I fantasized it was Jony Ive that outbid me, but now he says, I don't think so. Steve didn't wear a watch? Correct. So then what exactly was the genesis of the watch project? The first discussions, according to Jony Ive, took place a few months after Steve's passing. It's really interesting. If you want to learn more about the thinking behind the Apple Watch, this is a fascinating article, including Ive's admission that for a longest time, they didn't want to have any buttons on the watch. Apple hates buttons, as you know. We were predisposed to thinking direct manipulation was sort of a panacea, but it took a modicum of courage, said Jony Ive, to understand that this secondary device, the Crown, was a fantastic solution for scrolling and making choices. It also allowed us to offer a second button on the device. So a really good article on the design process and the thinking of the Apple Watch. So,
how often do you use the buttons on the watch?
Well, it's really.
I was thinking about while you're reading it. I was like, I barely.
Well, for Apple Pay, you use it, right? You tap the thing. I use the Time Machine sometimes to scroll. Unfortunately, I agree with Jony Ive. The idea of adding buttons was something you wanted to avoid if you could, but that's the problem with this small thing. I'll tell you where I end up using the Crown a lot and scrolling. There are a lot of applications that use it for selecting stuff. In fact, the Siri watch face, the new watch face they came out with, the Series 3, it's a simple watch face, but if you scroll it, it goes on down. It's like a long page of a face. So there are reasons you might want to use it. So I do. Let me think. I press the Crown to start the activities.
Right. Because I guess I do like my watch. I just don't. I'm not a heavy use. Yeah. I'm not a heavy user.
You just use it as a watch.
I use it as a watch. Well, I tap my little. I have my little interface and I tap it. I think the thing I use the more than anything else is the timer to make my tea. So that's like literally. I'm always
and do you trigger it by voice?
No, I just tap on. I have the timer is one of my complications, and so I just tap it, tap, and then I walk away, and then I know that my tea will not be over seeped.
Yeah,
it's very very upsetting for me when the tea is
Hodinky.com. Cover story by Benjamin Clymer. Interview with Jony Ive about the Apple Watch. Certainly well worth reading. Let's take a break and we can get your picks of the week if you want. In just a bit, we'll see if Rene can join us for that. He may or may not be able to. Our show today brought to you by Rocket Mortgage. If you're about to buy a house, I doubt you're going to write a check or bring a bag of cash to buy the thing. You're probably going to get a mortgage. May I make him a suggestion? Rocket Mortgage from Quicken Loans, the #1 lender in the country. Quicken Loans is also a very forward-thinking, very modern company. Probably why they've been #1 in customer satisfaction for 8 years running, according to J.D. Power. And they realized that the mortgage experience wasn't really keeping up with the times. It was kind of Dickensian. You go to a bank, ask, please, can I have some money? Fill out a long application, fax stuff to the bank, paperwork, pay stubs. Quicken Loans created a client-focused technological revolution they call Rocket Mortgage. It's entirely online. And it's completely transparent. It's fast. You'll fully understand everything that's going on, and you can be confident that you're getting exactly the right mortgage for you. And I tell you what, for geeks like me, the idea that I could do this whole thing on my smartphone at an open house and within 10 minutes get loan approval, that's enough for me. Whether you're buying your first home or your 10th, Rocket Mortgage is a whole new way of doing this that you will love. All you have to do is answer a few simple questions, then based on income, assets, and credit, they'll analyze all the home loan options for which you qualify, and you find the run that's just right for you. You choose the term, the down payment, the rate, and you're good to go. Under 10 minutes in most cases. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Apply simply, understand fully, mortgage confidently. I don't know exactly what Iron Man has to do with this, but it's on the front page. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/MacBreak. rocketmortgage.com/MacBreak. Equal housing lender. Licensed in all 50 states. NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030. I guess the idea is you could be in a giant Infinity War battle and still get a loan. Is that the theory? Is that the premise?
Yes.
Rene says yes. rocketmortgage.com/MacBreak. We thank Quicken Loans for their support of MacBreak Weekly. Are you off your call, Rene, or you just
yes. No, I am. And the Infinity War thing, I mean, you need a good mortgage if you're going to be in an Infinity War.
It's expensive. It is not a cheap thing to do. Well, why don't you kick things off then with your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is a lot of fun. I'm going to just strap it on right now. It is the Oculus.
You got it.
Go.
This is their new standalone Rift.
Yeah, so I mean, I was shocked at how inexpensive it was. I thought that was it was $200 US, $250 I think for the version I got, which is 64 gigabytes. I thought that was the price for like the controller or something, but it's for the whole thing. And yet there are a few compromises, like you can turn your head side to side and you can go up and down and you can look through three-dimensional space, but because there's no sort of tower sensors the way a Vive has, and there's no sort of other directional sensors, you can't walk around with it. So it does, well, you can, but it doesn't care if you walk around.
You
while
can walk
you're wearing
around,
it.
but it doesn't care.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the gameplay. So it's a little bit more passive. It's a little bit more consumption focused. But they're doing a couple of really interesting things. Like the way they're using the GPU to render is focused on putting more rendering and more pixels in the middle of the display. And they're using lens technology that just sort of focuses the density in the middle. So as a result, it actually looks better than the big Oculus. Like it looks, there's almost no screen door effect. And you can watch Netflix. It's really cool. Like it's a complete con. It's almost like touch, like those force touch things where you're being lied to, but you're really happy with a lie. And the games so far are really fun. Like again, they're on rails because you can't really walk around. But I went through the Stranger Things and the fishing and the undersea exploration, and I watched a bunch of Netflix. And Netflix is great because you really are. It's like being in your own private movie theater. You don't see anybody around you, and you can move the screen forward or back, and you can watch just anything that Netflix has to offer. So it doesn't fix this. It doesn't fix the in-room social thing. Like if 3 or 4 of you are wearing them all in the same room, you're still a bunch of people wearing visors in the same room.
It'd be great on the plane, though.
Oh, that's the first thing I thought of. And then I thought, like, when I take it off, are they all going to be staring at me? Like, are the stewardess going to be looking at me like, you jerk?
Oh, everybody on the plane is in their own personal space, wearing a weird headgear and things. That's
Russell Holly told me he wore his, and the minute he took it off, the stewardess ran up and goes, "Oh, thank God! I've been waiting to give you your beverage the entire time."
I'm just concerned about all the pictures of me that are going to appear on Instagram of me like just with my mouth slightly holding a gape, with like bags of peanuts that have been like thrown onto my chest because I'm just oblivious to what's going on about me.
And the controller is really well engineered. The whole thing is a lot of fun. And if you've been curious about VR, but it's been too expensive, this is basically, you don't need a computer for this. There are no strings to hold you down. It's all self-contained. You don't need any of the other things. You don't need a smartphone in the front flaps. You're not wasting your smartphone battery, and you're not using a device that wasn't actually optimized for this. It's a really good way to get started, to test it out, to see if you like it.
What is the battery life?
They say 4 hours, but I think that's if you're actually doing a lot of gaming, which I've been mostly doing like experiences, like watching Netflix or going through undersea caves and things, and it's been lasting like 6 hours for me.
Wow.
It's totally underperformed.
That's a
I did like
coast-to-coast
3 hours
flight.
and it was at 65%, so I was really happy.
I'm intrigued. Thank you.
Well, you have to get one, Leo. Like you have to.
Maybe I do. We've got one coming in for review, but I don't know. That sounds like something I might want to get. Yeah.
I got to say, if it's half what it's like for these if it's half as good as what it's like to have a cardboard or the Gear VR from Samsung, watching movies, I was skeptical at first, but at least the software on the Gear VR, for instance, it puts you into like an actual movie theater, and it's like there are movies that I've had like just ripped to like HD that are super widescreen that I was interacting with this movie that was made in 1972, 1973, the way the director clearly intended me to react to it. Meaning that there was like something happening on the left-hand side of the screen, and in the background there was just someone taking a nap, like on a bed. And clearly the director meant not for me to take this whole thing in my field of vision, but to turn my head and then to see the whole thing. And it became one of my favorite ways to watch a movie.
I just got the Lawrence of Olivier super wide. Lawrence of Arabia, not Lawrence of Olivier. I'm a little jet lagged. Although that would be a pretty good movie, Lawrence of Olivier. Yeah. The Lawrence of Arabia was super widescreen. Blu-ray, but boy, I guess it's not on Netflix, so I won't be able to watch it.
But there's also one caveat in that it's owned by Facebook, which now disturbs some people. Like I got some pushback from people who said, yeah, but it's Facebook. And I do understand that. I got my Oculus before Facebook bought them, and the minute they bought them, I'm like, oh, that's smart, because I can close your app, I can close your tab, but it's much harder to take a helmet off my head. But I signed in with my original Oculus ID. You can still make an Oculus ID. I suppose it can, if it knows your email addresses, it can link those and make a shadow profile. I don't know. But the idea of Facebook on my face hasn't been that scary yet.
Do you need to have a Facebook account? It's not.
They make it so no. So they make it like you don't know that. Like you get in, and if you don't have an Oculus ID, like I have, it's a giant Facebook button, almost like what they got caught for doing in the EU. It's like a giant and tiny at the bottom. It says log in with Oculus. And old-fashioned link text.
Yeah, because I don't have a Facebook account anymore.
They try to get you, but like I have not done a single Facebooky thing with it so far, and I'm super happy about that.
Yeah. What was the code name of this device? The Face Hugger.
I think it was. If you really don't like Facebook, the Google and Lenovo have a very, very similar device that you can look at instead.
Yeah. I was a little concerned that because it was so inexpensive that the screens just wouldn't be that good and would really not look as good as even a Gear VR, which is using the Samsung.
They're not
phone.
OLED, so they're fast switch LCD, and typically you can't use LCD because the refresh rate isn't high enough. Right. And but this has a really high refresh rate, and again, it's got these Furnurvural, I forget how to pronounce it, lenses that really focus you in the middle of it. Fresnel, that's right.
Although I like Furnurvural.
I remember. I'm going to use that.
John Travolta.
Fluffernutter lenses.
It does make almost no screen door effect, even with the resolution not being like 8K per eye.
And now that you said that intrigues me.
And the frame rate is 60, right, rather than 9. Rather than 90.
I think the developers can. There's two choices for developers. They can choose how they want to handle it, but so far I haven't had any problems with it.
Oh wow! The film editor for Lawrence of Arabia has just passed away at the age of 92. She heard that I got the widescreen and want to watch it on a helmet, and.
That was it. That was enough. You kids.
I'm checking out.
Laporte.
Good. All right. That's a strong recommendation. We will have our review, I think, in the next couple of weeks on the new screensavers. Andy, what's your pick of the week?
I've got kind of a double pick. My pick is a movie, but it's also an excuse to plug my best and oldest friend, John's movie blog. In 2009, he set the goal of watching a movie he hasn't seen every day and writing about it for an entire year.
Wow.
And he decided, because he is such an orderly, my God, if he is your office manager, he's like having Jeeves the butler running. He is so logistically focused, and he got, well, let's have all these movies linked to each other. So he basically came up with this list of the movies he plans to see, and he will only stop when he runs out of movies on his list, but he keeps finding new ways to link new movies to it. So soon he will be up to his 3,000th movie review / essay. And so we go to Honky's movieyear.blogspot.com. I think that was his Twitter handle or whatever, and he felt he needed to use that, and I can't recommend it highly enough. But we've been friends since junior high, and he lives in the New York area. So whenever I'm in New York, I get a chance to have like a long visit with him. So I got to see 3 of the movies that he was seeing night after night after night. This is one of them, and one of the great things about this is that it's not, oh, I can't wait to see the new Avengers movie. Sometimes it's that I need a movie that will link Tuesday's movie to Thursday's movie, and he'll find something that has like the same actor in it, and so he winds up having to like watch a lot of random stuff. So the movie that we saw that he totally undersold, because it turned out to be one of the best movies I've seen all year. It's called Hardcore Henry. Don't joke. It is essentially, imagine a Russian dashcam video, but as a feature-length movie. It is all shot first person with GoPro cameras attached to like the character's head. And it is a feature-length action movie where it is one of the most thrilling things I have ever seen. And also it doesn't try to get too heavy-handed with, it's not like The Matrix where we're building a whole world here to philosophy. We're going to have 90 minutes where you can't catch your breath even once. We're going to have a story that the characterization of the story, it's not going to win an Academy Award, but the whole point is to keep you engaged and keep mysteries coming, and then solve those mysteries for you. And I'll tell you that not just because of the first person point of view, but also because the action is so realistic that it is twice as thrilling as anything I've seen in a 200 or 300 millimeter $3 million Hollywood blockbuster. The Black Widow riding a motorcycle off the top of a hotel, landing 300 feet onto the ground, taking off, and then going onto a ramp and picking up a shield isn't 1/10 as interesting as watching this guy in a motorcycle sidecar drive, there you go, into a van. Especially because it will not let your pulse go down for 1 second. I was 20 minutes into this movie, and I was on my iPad, and I said, okay, going to Amazon, buying the Blu-ray, because if anything, I want to see the behind the scenes shots of how they did this. It was amazing, and you'll find out that amazingly, it only cost $2 million, and amazingly, there were almost no injuries on set.
That's amazing.
Despite the fact that this is, I guess one of the things that kind of makes it more exciting for you as you're watching it is that this is almost entirely shot in Russia, and you feel as though maybe there aren't quite as many rules as to what you can do to like stunt people and extras. But I'm not saying this is it's unfortunate maybe that we're talking about this in the same breath as Lawrence of Arabia. It is not Lawrence of Arabia, but oh my God, it is such an entertaining movie. I
remember when it came out, and I wanted to see it, and I forgot. Now that would be great if you put that on Renee's pick and watched it on your Oculus. Holy cow!
I'm wondering what that would be like. I think it would be terrible because
you might throw up.
Yeah, I mean, but I read I was so excited to find out like how they had done all this stuff, because it's not presented as one continuous shot, but it could almost be, it's almost that kind of experience. And they didn't just like glue, they didn't just have the standard like where you got your Oculus on the headband or something. They figured out after some experiments, they found out that, well, no, that's not the right angle. You actually need to have the camera like actually mounted like at mouth or chin level to get like the first person perspective they were looking for. So they built this special helmet that also has like dampers on it that limits it stabilizes it just enough to make it herky jerky. So yes, you better believe that the first thing I'm going to try with Gear VR or a new Oculus is this movie. But I am anticipating the need to tear the goggles off my head and run to the bathroom really quickly.
Yeah, no kidding. Hardcore Henry and Honky's, what's it called?
Honky'sMovieYear.com. Again, he was going to do this for 1 year. It is now close to the 10th anniversary and is 3,000.
I'm thinking Honky's not married.
He is married.
Oh,
he's been married for like 17 years to a wonderful woman.
She must be. A movie a night for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and it's fun because they're not all like movie reviews. They're basically essays on the experience of watching the movie, and he rates them. And that's why I have another friend who's also a fan of John's site, and he often gets angry because he will say The Third Man 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10 for The Third Man compared to the Huffalumps movie 7 out of 10. John?
I do like the idea, though. I was browsing through it of getting ideas of movies to watch from it, and it gave me a bunch of great movies.
I don't know why Turner Classic Movies does not hire him to program that channel.
Yeah,
because again, he will tell you why he's doing a string of movies that all involve like, all involve mistaken identities, and a string that's all about a car that gets demolished. And sometimes it's just, again, an actor that carries on from one to another. But this is an unbroken chain that's going on for nearly 3,000. And it's like he is an inspiration to me. Every time I'm like, oh God, I don't know if I want to write a column or something today. It's like John has written something almost every single day for 3,000 days in a row.
Now let me ask you a behind the scenes thing: is he getting these movies on iTunes, or is he getting a DVD subscription in Netflix, or how is
it's a combination of he subscribes to pretty much every cable channel. So he records a lot of stuff off of cable. Also, one of his previous duties, he used to work for like a in the animation industry, and one of his jobs was to record every night of television and look for commercials that involve animation, and then like create a highlight reel that gets sent nationally to people who use this service or whatever. And so he's just used to doing all this and organizing it. But sometimes it's like he knows that he wants to see he knows he wants to see the new Avengers movie. He knows that the release date is this, so he will adjust this. He will adjust it so that there will be a reason why this can work inside the link that he's been building.
Wow.
Right there. And
is he out of work, or he just doesn't have really much to do at work?
He works for Bill Plimpton, the animator.
Yeah.
He is sort of like, if you know what Radar O'Reilly was to the 407 7th MASH, is what he is
Plimpton's
to
Radar.
It's basically he does everything that required to get that done. And he's a graduate of NYU Film School, and he's basically been working in the industry, essentially helping directors create their businesses by explaining to them, no, you have to. A key story about John and how good he is at what he does. An actor who was one of the lead actors on Friends wanted to participate in one of Bill Plimpton's movies, and he's in the union, and so they would have to pay him a certain minimum, and so it looked like it couldn't happen. But John downloaded the PDF of every single rule that the Screen Guild had, found a loophole that said that so long as we only use him for this amount of time, so long as we book him like this, we can pay him what we can afford to pay him. And that's how this Friends actor became a voice on a Bill Plimpton movie. As a kid, he is the person that will win every board game because he's the only person who read the inside of the lid that the box came in. And he's the only one who knows that you can do the thing that you just thought he was cheating at. Can't recommend. That's another recommendation. If you have a business, hire John to do anything. He'll make it wonderful.
Honky'sMovieYear.com. And now, without I see you're browsing it as well.
Of course, that's what I do.
He's looking for movies to see. It's always looking for new movies to look at. Time for Alex Lindsay's pick of the week.
So my pick of the week is a new broadcasting tool, and so I'm just starting to play with it. Justine Ezerick has been playing with it a bit, and so she piqued my interest, and as I watch it on the iPhone, it's just worth watching. So anyway, this is called Caffeine.tv. And it's in pre-release, so this is kind of your early chance to kind of see as people start to re-experiment with live streaming. Now, of course, we pay a lot of attention to live streaming, so it's what we do.
We do.
And so we watch what everybody does, And so, there's interesting things like other ones like Musically and Lively are a format that we watch a lot because I don't understand it. I still keep looking at it. It's so hyper.
It's because you're not 12.
I know. It's like they're dropping coins and they're doing all this other stuff. And so that kind of makes sense. This one is probably you can broadcast from the web, from your PC and camera and the phone. And the one that I find the most interesting is the PC game and camera. So when you do that, when you actually watch it on your phone, you get an over/under of the video. So what they're doing is they're taking two videos in and they're actually compositing them in different ways depending on if you hold your phone at vertically, you're getting kind of an over/under. You see the person in full screen and below them. You see the game, and then if you turn it to landscape, it basically builds a picture-in-picture for you. Anyway, I find it to be they're just experimenting with the way things the way that they're doing things. I think that this is probably if anything is going to start, it'd be any competitor to Twitch. It's most likely this is Caffeine.tv, and so. They've partnered with a lot of. That you can do it from within these. Or you can do it on your PC with these games, and it's taking your webcam, and it's just a different way of doing it. So I guess I think it's worth checking out if you're into live streaming. Definitely check out Caffeine.tv and even just download the app and watch it. So you'll see that composite there, but they're doing that for them. So they're taking some of that work away from.
It's kind of nice, yeah.
From the user. I'm working on some game stuff right now, and I want to control that. But I think for the average user who just wants to stream and play games, I think that it's a great solution.
It's actually started by two former Apple folks, Bob Keegren and Sam Roberts.
I haven't gotten into Fortnite yet, by the way.
Fortnite is awesome.
I just get killed really fast.
Well, I do too, but that's one of the great things about Fortnite is
some
you can then
person
continue to
over
watch
it hits me with an axe.
after somebody kills you. And you end up seeing the whole game because whoever kills them, you get to watch them. And
right.
I really like the spectator mode.
Yeah.
That's as
but
far as
you saw how you could move around. You can move it so it's not composited together. So you have that,
it's really
that
kind
video.
Of a neat tool.
That video can be moved. You can hide it. You can move it. So from the user's perspective, they've separated that connection between that. So if you really want to see the person, you can. If you want to hide them and not see them and just watch the game, you can. So it's an interesting.
It's a couple of guys who worked at Apple for Apple TV, did Apple TV. So
it's cool.
They have some chops.
Yep, check it out.
Thank you, Alex, for being here. It's great to see you again. You can find Alex's work at Pixel Core or follow him on the Twitter. That's the best thing to do, at ALEXLINDSAY.
I've got more videos coming soon.
Whatever he's up to, you can,
they're so good.
He'll let you know on the Twitter.
I took a break because I had to rethink it because I was like, this isn't going to work. There was no sustainability to it, so I took a break. And then we're also shooting some videos in the studio of just tidbits about production that.
So your videos are like on how to do stuff, like the teardown.
The teardown is one, and then the new ones are like little tips on if you're buying SDI cables or how to dealing with audio.
This is Alex Lindsay.
Playing the teardown.
Here you have a nice shot. This is where I look at other people's shows and I
videographer doing their job well,
and I circle things and talk about things.
I love that. By the way, this is such a great show.
Yeah,
really enjoy it. It's kind of what you want. It's kind of like what you wish you could do with Alex. Just have him come and watch,
like a consultant.
Yeah, just watch stuff with you and say, "You see what he's doing there?"
Yeah.
It's completely.
Can you tell me how horrible I am, but also tell me why?
ALEXLINDSAY on the Twitter. Rene Ritchie from imore.com, where he's working very hard, not only writing millions of words a week, but he's also got the great Vector podcast, which is daily. I don't understand how he does it all, but he does. And you got
3 audio and 2 video now.
Yeah. And of course, with
Mix.
the new Lutron blinds.
Yeah, they finished them, but they're
very
not
exciting.
set up yet, so I'll have to try them.
Yeah. And imore.com, of course, to find out more about what Rene's up to. imore.com/vector to see the latest Vector videos. And of course, Mr. Andy, look at this. What tool do you use for this? This is awesome.
That's the Libsyn embed.
Oh my God! Oh, these are individual shows. I thought these were chapters or something. I could jump to a chapter.
No, I mean we've Jim Messendorf, who helps me with the editing, has run into a little bit of a brick wall where we can have links or we can have chapters and not both. So we're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, we never did it because it ends up being hardware specific or provider specific, and so we just.
How are you up to 110 episodes already?
I know.
It's 3 episodes a week.
Between you and John, I feel like such a piece of gum off of some bad person's shoe.
Today on the audio podcast, I'm talking to Patrick O'Neill, who created Holoclip and just left the company. But he talks about what Holoclip was like. And on the video show, I talk about why the Apple Watch is more important as a product than the iPhone.
He's an overachiever. That's all I can say.
Yes.
Andy Inatko, you'll find him at inatko.com, ihnatko.com, on the Twitter. And anything you want to plug besides your material podcasts?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, my piece on the Google I/O keynote is going to be on Fast Company either late today or sometime tomorrow. I'm also going to be on Boston Public Radio tomorrow, also talking mostly about Google I/O and a couple other things. And hopefully I will have some big news to announce in a week or two. Things are still kind of forming, but when it's a thing that will have a date, then I can announce it. But stay tuned.
That sounds ominous.
I think it's
amazing
cake for everyone.
Or amazing.
It's when everybody's finally going to pay. Oh, boy, will they pay.
Normally we do this show. We're doing it a little bit differently because of a crazy week with Google I/O and the Build keynote. But we will do the show next week at its usual time, which is right after iOS Today, 11 a.m. Pacific on Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1800 UTC. Stop by and watch it. Either in studio, you can email tickets at twit.tv. We'll put out a chair for you. Or you can watch on the stream, twit.tv/live. If you do that, join us in the chat room too, irc.twit.tv. But of course, I know you have a busy life, and maybe the easiest thing would be to download an episode and watch it at your convenience. We will let you do that too. On-demand versions of everything we do, available audio or video, audio and video, at twit.tv. For this show, it's twit.tv/mbw. Or you could just search for MacBreak Weekly in your favorite podcast application, and you will definitely find it. And you can make it a regular habit. Subscribe, if you will. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. But I'm afraid it is time now to get back to work, because break time is over. Alex Lindsay coined that phrase. See ya.
Over.
Over.